So let's look at some best practices. Thinking in terms of a continuum of property rights. So this is the idea that I mentioned, whereby we need to think not in terms of boxes, box A, box B, but in terms of continuums, and in terms of not just thinking about full property rights, but things like use rights. So Mexico, for example, there are in the ejidos, in these communities over there, they get certificates of rights that are for usufruct rights. These are the kinds of things that can be used in places like Mexico. They've been used in squatter settlements around peri-urban areas and in a number of other cases. But it's a different way of thinking, and I think that, and you'll see that this reference that I have at the bottom over here, the GLTN network, has promoted this, not only this continuum of property rights, but also trying to promote participatory approaches. We've had participatory mapping or social mapping for quite a while. There's probably the last 20 years that's been coming on fairly strong. But now we're just looking at other approaches, things like crowdsourcing, and there's an interesting pilot project in Tanzania that USAID is funding, where they're trying to use people reporting back things. So because of this, I should have mentioned cell phones as one of the technologies there, but cell phones now allow people to provide information, and so crowdsourcing is one possible way. It's still in its early days, but certainly has the participatory aspect to it. The quality assurance thing, we will have to deal with that, but that's certainly a promising approach that we're going to see more of. Then increasingly, we really need to address the land rights of women and underrepresented groups. This ties right in with not only with democracy, but with food security. I was involved with a project in the DRC many years ago where econometricians were working out how many calories were coming into the household, how many calories were going out in terms of work, and they gave women a value of 10 and men a value of 1, meaning that women were doing 10 times as much work in agriculture as men, and probably also bringing up the kids. So to not secure their property rights is really kind of missing a big part of what we're trying to do in this whole area. And then focusing on needs, so not trying to grab the best possible solution, the Mercedes, but a Volkswagen might work fine. It's what works in the local environment that counts here. Finally, let me finish with some key points here. Technology transfer shouldn't be underrated. We've had a difficult time with this. We thought we'd found a solution with the GPS methodology, for example, but to actually transfer it and get it institutionalized is still a problem, and really needs something like a technical extension agent to help people go through this transition from a manual world to a digital world. And the rapid change in technology, how do we deal with this? We need to anticipate that this is going to continue to change, as I'm sure all of you have to get different versions of the software that you use. So how does a government deal with this if you've got rapidly changing technology, software, hardware and stuff? One approach that some projects have used is to contract this out to the private sector. So the private sector has the sort of engine room in the back, and the government is at the front desk dealing with that. So in that way, you rely more on the private sector to keep up to date with these kinds of changes. I like to sort of quote this Moore's law as a way of how rapidly things are changing. And Moore's law is, that the power of computing doubles approximately every 2 years. So that, I think I probably got that across in my earlier slide when I started off with my 16 kbyte cassette tape, and we landed up with gigabytes or petabytes or whatever they are now. Then the other caution is that, we need to be careful that internet is a great thing, and it certainly increases access, but we need to make sure that the people that we're trying to get access to, do they have access to the internet? So in some countries I know that they make a big deal of, yes, you can access our services and our data via the internet, but if 30% of the people or 50% of the people don't have access to the internet, you really haven't, and it's probably the ones that have the most difficult access, that are most distant from the offices. So we need to be aware of who we're catering for here, and whose access we're talking about. Finally, technology, we really need to think about the fit for purpose. This is a term that's being bandied around a lot now in the UN and in various other arenas. And I guess this is what we used to call appropriate technology. And this is probably nonsensical, but we essentially really need to look at what we're trying to do, what the goal is, and look at the environment and try and find what's appropriate, what's flexible, and what can be fitted for the local purpose. And finally, I'd just like to quote this Amara's law, which is that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run, which is quite true, and underestimate the effect in the long run. So certainly technology has its place, and it does change our world, and it certainly has changed the world in the land tenure administration system side of things. And I think that is the end of my module. I will thank you very much for attending this, and hope you've gained something from it. Goodbye.